My name is Esther. I am 54 years old, and for 30 of those years, I believe my hands were meant for two things: shaping delicate silver into jewelry in my backyard studio and holding the life I had built with Simon. That morning, the sun fell through the old workshop window, dust motes dancing over a nearly finished ring. It was a peaceful silence, the kind built over 25 years in the same house. I was thinking of Simon away on another business trip, grateful for the quiet rhythm of a long marriage. Then my phone buzzed. A text. Anna will swing by the house this afternoon to pick up my blue suitcase and the garment bag from the hall closet. Be a dear and have them ready. Don't make it awkward. That last sentence, "don't make it awkward," sat in my stomach like a cold stone. Anna was his former assistant. Sending her here to our home was new. It was the first loose thread in the fabric of my day, and when you have spent a lifetime crafting things, you know a loose thread can unravel everything. If you are settling in to hear how my quiet morning unraveled into a story I never thought I would tell, I would love to know where in the world you are listening from today. And if you want to make sure you catch every careful twist in this tale, I hope you will take a moment to subscribe. I pulled the blue suitcase and the garment bag from the hall closet. The suitcase was a fine leather one, a gift from me for our 25th anniversary. As I placed it by the front door, a strange impulse made me unzip it. Inside, his clothes were neatly packed, but in the inside pocket of a suit jacket, I found a receipt. It was from the Gilded Oak, the most expensive restaurant in the city, dated for a night 2 months ago, when Simon had told me he was at a tedious client dinner. The receipt was for two. I stared at it, the numbers blurring. My own hands felt very far away. I reached for the thin silver chain I always wore around my neck. Hanging from it, tucked under my shirt when I worked, was my original wedding band, a simple white gold circle. I never wore it at the bench for fear of damaging it. I unfastened the clasp and let the ring drop into the palm of my hand. It felt cool and heavy. I slipped it into the zippered compartment of the suitcase. I do not know why I did that. Perhaps some part of me already knew. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 p.m. Anna stood there, but she was not the polished professional assistant I remembered. She was dressed in expensive casual wear, a silk blouse, designer jeans. She wore a pair of diamond studs that caught the light. Her smile was wide practiced. "Esther, so good to see you," she said, her voice too sweet. "Simon did not want to trouble you, but he needs these for his extended trip." I simply nodded, handed her the bags. As she took them, she shifted her weight, and one hand came to rest on her lower abdomen, a slow, deliberate circle. She was not showing much, but the gesture was unmistakable. Her smile shifted then from polite to something victorious, gloating. "He is so excited about the nursery," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "He says the light in the east-facing room of his new place is perfect." The words hung in the air between us, a declaration of war wrapped in a casual update. I said nothing, not a word. I just looked at her, at the hand on her belly, at the smile that thought it had won. I closed the door slowly, the click of the latch sounding final. I leaned my back against the wood, the silence of the house now a roaring in my ears. The pain was a physical blow, sharp and deep. But as I stood there breathless, something else began to rise through the shock. A cold, clear clarity. He thought he could just send her here, to my doorstep, to collect his things and his victory. He had mistaken my quiet for weakness, my stability for surrender. I looked down at my hands stained with the metal dust, capable of creating beautiful, durable things. He would get his bags, but he would also get a creation all my own. The next few hours were a strange, detached flurry. The emotional pain was there, a dull, constant ache, but it was pushed aside by a fierce, focused need to know. I moved to Simon's home office, a room he rarely used anymore. I started with the filing cabinet, the one that held our household papers. He had always been careless with the mundane details of life, leaving it to me. I was methodical. Bank statements, credit card bills, investment summaries. I was not his wife right then. I was an auditor. and the ledger was full of lies. I found regular transfers to a new account, one I did not recognize. $500 here, $1,000 there over the last 8 months. I found a lease agreement for a luxury apartment in the new waterfront district signed by Simon 6 months prior. The monthly rent was more than our first mortgage payment. The tenant was listed as Simon J. Arthurs. Our joint savings account, the one we had labeled Future Dreams, showed a withdrawal of $40,000 2 months ago. $40,000. For a nursery, perhaps. Each discovery was not a new wound, but a layer of ice settling over my heart, making it numb and heavy. I needed legal understanding. I called my attorney, Gerald Lowell. He had handled my parents' estate and had been a family friend for decades. I made an appointment for the next morning, stating I wanted to review my will. Sitting across from Gerald in his book-lined office, I felt the first flicker of safety. I asked general questions about asset division, about separate property, about how infidelity might impact proceedings in our state. I was careful, but Gerald was sharp. His kind eyes studied me over his glasses. "Esther," he said gently, "these are very specific questions for a simple will update. Is everything all right at home?" I assured him it was just being prudent at my age. He did not press, but as I left, he said, "My door is always open for anything." Back home, the house felt different. It was no longer just a home. It was a crime scene, and I was the detective. I went to the garage and brought in the one bag of Simon's that remained an old leather weekender he loved, filled with what he called his personal treasures: a vintage wristwatch from his father, some old letters, a silver flask. I placed it in the middle of the living room rug and stared at it. This was not about breaking things. It was about craftsmanship. It was about sending a message only a craftsman could send. A plan, intricate and patient, began to form in my mind, fitting together like the gears of a clock. On a hunch, I called an old friend from my college days, Martin, who now worked in commercial real estate. After some pleasantries, I casually asked if he knew anything about the new Archwater residences, where Simon's leased apartment was. Martin whistled. "Fancy place." I heard a juicy bit of gossip about that building. One of the tenants is a real estate agent who leased a unit to himself. Big ethical no-no. The management company is apparently livid looking into it. I thanked him and hung up. I looked at the weekender bag. "Perfect," I whispered to the empty room. The game was no longer just personal. It was professional, too. I carried the weekender bag into my studio. This was my sanctuary, a place of creation. Now, it would be the workshop for a different kind of project. The anger had crystallized into a cold, precise intention. I laid a clean cloth on my main workbench and emptied the bag. The contents were familiar, sentimental to him: the watch, the letters tied with a faded ribbon, the flask, a few silk pocket squares. I set them aside with care. I was not a vandal. I was an artist. My revenge would be a masterpiece of subtlety. First, the bag itself. It was a beautiful, supple leather. I took my sharpest seam ripper and began with the steady hands of a surgeon to undo the interior lining along the bottom seam. I worked slowly, creating a hidden pocket between the leather shell and the cloth lining. From my supply shelves, I retrieved a small glass vial. Inside was a fine, glittering powder. It was not poison. It was the collected waste from years of filing and sanding silver, a mixture of ultra-fine metal dust and powdered emery. It was harmless to touch, but notoriously invasive, almost impossible to fully clean. I funneled a generous amount of this metallic silt into the hidden cavity of the bag. Then, with a needle and thread that matched the original perfectly, I stitched the lining back up. The work was flawless. To any eye, the bag was untouched. Next, the garment bag. I mixed a dye from powdered cochineal, a natural insect-based pigment used for centuries. I made a solution so dilute it was almost clear, just a whisper of pink. Using the finest sable brush I owned, normally used for painting enamel details, I applied tiny dots of the solution to the inside collars of his dress shirts, the inner armpit seams of his suit jackets, the hidden waistbands of his trousers. It was invisible when dry, but the moment it met sweat or moisture from cleaning it, would bloom into faint, persistent pink stains. The final touch was the ring. I retrieved my wedding band from where I had left it in the suitcase. I held it in my palm. This was the symbol. I would not let him have it, but he would not know it was gone until the right moment. At my casting station, I quickly made a mold using a generic ring blank. I melted down some scrap pewter, a cheap heavy metal, and poured it into the mold. Once cooled, I polished the crude ring and gave it a quick rhodium plate to mimic the white gold sheen. From a distance, it was a convincing duplicate. I placed this fake ring back into the suitcase's zippered pocket. The real one I set on my bench, a tiny circle of cool, honest metal. The packing was a ritual. I placed everything back into the bags with a meticulous order exactly as he had kept them. The final act was sending a text. I typed slowly. Your bags are ready. Sent via courier. I trust Anna received everything in good order this afternoon. E. The period, not a dash. The initial, not my name. It was the first formal communication of our new relationship, distant, civil, and terminally cold. The call came later that evening. Simon's name flashed on my screen, the photograph I still had of him, smiling from years ago. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. Esther. His voice was tight, a blend of anger and bewildered frustration. What did you do to my things? I kept my voice level, leaning against my workbench. I packed them as you requested, Simon. Is there a problem? A problem, he exploded. My best dress shirts are ruined. There are pink stains everywhere. My skin itches every time I touch that weekender bag. And my ring, it feels different. What kind of childish nonsense is this? I could hear the high-pitched background chatter of a woman's voice. Anna's upset. He must have put his hand over the receiver, but I caught his muffled, snapping reply. I don't know, Anna. Just stop crying. The stress isn't good for the baby. That did it. The carefully maintained dam of my composure did not break. It simply opened its gates, releasing a flood of ice water. My voice dropped low and steady, each word a chiseled stone. Oh, Simon, you are worried about her stress, the baby's stress. I paused, letting the silence hum. Tell me, how much stress do you think it caused when you sent your pregnant mistress to pick up your luggage from the home I have lived in for 25 years? The home I paid for with my work while you were building your career. Did you think I would serve tea and sympathy? I could hear his sharp intake of breath. I continued, relentless. The apartment on Archwater Drive, the $40,000 from our future dreams account, the dinners at the Gilded Oak. Did you enjoy the wine list? I have the receipt. The silence on his end was absolute, stunned. Then it shifted, hardening. You have been snooping. This is unacceptable. I will have my lawyer. I cut him off. Gerald Lowell has been my lawyer since before we said our vows. He is looking forward to hearing from yours. And Simon, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, those bags, consider them an opening statement. The main argument is yet to come. I ended the call. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From the raw, electrifying power of truth finally spoken aloud. The facade was shattered. The war was declared. The next morning I woke not with despair, but with a profound sense of purpose. The emotional paralysis was gone, replaced by a list of clear, actionable items. I was no longer a victim in my own story. I was the project manager. My first stop was my neighbor, Marta. Marta was a retired investigative journalist, a woman with sharp eyes and a fiercely loyal heart. Over coffee, in her sunlit kitchen, I told her everything. The whole sordid tale without embellishment, my voice flat and factual. Marta listened, her expression growing stormy. When I finished, she slammed her palm on the table. That coward, that absolute weasel. Then she leaned forward. What do you need, Esther? I told her about Martin's gossip about Simon leasing the apartment to himself. Marta's eyes lit with a familiar journalistic fire. "I know the head of the condo board in that building," she said, "an old source, and I know the managing broker of Simon's firm. A little bird can whisper in both ears." She gave me a firm nod. "Consider it whispered." Next, I called Gerald. No pretense this time. "Gerald, it's Esther. I need to file for divorce. Simon is having a child with another woman. I have evidence of financial concealment." His voice was all business protective. "Come in this afternoon. We will freeze joint assets and file a motion for temporary support. Do not touch any more of his property." I smiled grimly. Too late for that, but I have stopped. At the bank with Gerald's instructions in hand, I moved the remaining balance of our joint savings and checking accounts into a new individual account. I canceled the joint credit cards. Each signature, each click of a button, was a brick in a wall between my old life and my new one. Finally, I returned to my studio. I took out the real wedding band. I held it over the crucible. This was not an act of destruction, but of transformation. I melted it down, the white gold pooling into a liquid, brilliant tear. From that small ingot, I crafted a pair of earrings. Not anything dramatic, but tiny, perfect olive branches, symbols of peace won through strength. I polished them until they gleamed and put them on. They felt light but significant. A few days later, Simon called again. His voice was different, strained, the bluster gone. "Esther, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand. My broker is asking questions about the apartment lease. There is an ethics review." He sounded genuinely worried. "Can we just talk? 30 years has to count for something." I listened to the plea in his voice. I thought of the olive branches in my ears. "Simon," I said, my voice calm, final. "Those 30 years ended the moment Anna stood on my porch. All that is left now are the terms and conditions. My lawyer will be in touch." I placed the phone down gently. I had not just closed a door. I had walked through it. The fallout arrived not with a bang, but in a series of satisfying cascading whispers reported back to me by Marta and reflected in the increasingly terse communications from Simon's lawyer. Marta's little bird had been effective. The management company of the Archwater Residences launched a formal inquiry into the self-leasing violation, a serious breach of professional ethics that threatened Simon's standing with the building and, more importantly, with his own brokerage firm. The internal ethics review at his company was no longer a rumor, but a reality casting a shadow over his reputation. The contents of the bags did their slow, insidious work. Anna, according to Marta's source, who knew a cleaner in the building, was furious. The mysterious pink stains had ruined several expensive pieces of clothing. The silver dust from the weekender bag seemed to get everywhere on their new furniture and their bedding, causing endless cleaning and arguments. The fake ring, I learned later, had felt cheap and wrong to Simon immediately, a hollow symbol that confirmed the theft of everything real. Their shiny new life in the pristine apartment was fraying at the edges, infected by the subtle toxins I had seeded. My own life, in contrast, was moving toward a clean resolution. Gerald was a pit bull. With the evidence of the affair, the pregnancy, and the financial malfeasance, he negotiated a divorce settlement that left me with the house free and clear, a substantial portion of our investment portfolio, and spousal support for a period of time that would allow me to rebuild. Simon, facing professional disgrace and wanting to minimize public scandal, agreed to the terms with surprising speed. The day the papers were signed, I walked through my quiet house. I ended up in the backyard under the old apple tree Simon and I had planted our first spring there. It was heavy with fruit, the branches bowed but not broken. I understood that feeling. He had sent me his chaos, his betrayal, his pregnant mistress as a messenger, and I had sent him back the echo of that chaos, meticulously packaged inside the vanity of his own possessions. Then I had simply closed the door. The real victory was not his discomfort, but my own liberation. The gift in the bags was not the stains or the dust. It was the reflection of his own actions returned to sender. The quiet after the storm was not immediately peaceful. There were nights the silence felt like a physical weight, and days I could not bring myself to enter my studio. The grief was not for Simon, but for the life I had believed in, the future I had thought we were building. Healing is not a straight line. It is more like my work at the bench. It requires patience, repetition, and a tolerance for getting your hands dirty. I started small. I watered my plants. I had long lunches with Marta. I accepted dinner invitations from old friends who had heard whispers and rallied around me. Slowly, I returned to my tools. I did not force myself to create something grand. I just cleaned my bench. I organized my silver wire. I began a simple, repetitive task, making chain links. The steady, mindful work was a meditation. Over weeks, those links became a necklace. Then I started a new collection. I called it Second Growth, inspired by the way forests regenerate after a fire. The pieces were stronger, more textured, more interesting than my previous work. They spoke of resilience, not just fragility. A local boutique owned by a woman who had also rebuilt her life asked to feature the line. To my surprise, it resonated. My story, in a vague, artistic way, was part of the collection's narrative, and women connected with it. I learned that the most powerful response to a hurricane is not to become a bigger storm, but to be the deeply rooted tree that bends, gathers the broken branches, and uses them as kindling for a new fire. Revenge did not heal me. It was a necessary spark, a clearing of the ground. But the act of reclaiming my power stitch by careful stitched truth, by uncovered truth, was what built the new structure of my life. I stopped being Simon's wife, and I remembered slowly and surely how to be Esther. Just Esther, the maker. The house is quieter now, but it is a quiet that belongs entirely to me. Some afternoons, the light falls through the workshop window just so catching on a pair of olive branch earrings or a ring forged from resilience. I think about the strange alchemy of life. It can take a betrayal something base and painful, and if you are careful, if you are patient, you can transform it. Not into something pretty to hide the pain, but into something solid, something true, something that is entirely, unquestionably your own. Thank you for sharing this quiet corner of my story with me. If this tale of quiet strength and careful reclamation resonated with you, if you have ever had to pick up the pieces of something you thought was unbreakable, I would be honored to hear about your own journey in the comments below. What small act of reclamation have you made for yourself? Sharing our stories is how we weave a stronger fabric for all of us. If you would like to walk alongside more stories of rebuilding from the ground up, I hope you will join me here again. Please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength. Until next time, be kind to your own hands and to the life they are shaping, one deliberate choice at a time.